Alright, tonight I want to make you a new video, try to explain and do some troubleshooting when we have a scenario when our RV, our 8.1 Vortec in our RV will not start. The condition would be considered, I guess, a no crank situation. Sometimes you have a crank no start situation where you turn the key, the engine cranks over and over and over, but it doesn't start. That's a different scenario. The scenario I'm talking about is when you turn the key, nothing happens, just silence. And I'm going to try to walk you through some things you need to check to find out what the problem is. So let's start. Okay, scenario one. Here's a classic example. See, watch. See how we got these lights here on your instrument cluster? When you go to start it, and the lights go out. Now that's it. Let me get that beeping done. Okay, so that's a classic example, either a low battery or a loose connection, either a poor ground where it mounts to the frame, or a poor connection at either the negative or the positive post, or also a low battery. It's because I've kind of purposely loosened the battery connection so I could illustrate this example. So I'm going to do it again. See, now that's how you hear. Also, do you hear that ratcheting sound? Do that again. Because I've done this so much and I've actually pulled the battery down. Let the beeping get done. Because you see, actually, we're down to 9 volts. But listen to the ratcheting sound you may hear. Okay, so that's the sound of the solenoid. Hang on. That's the sound of the solenoid engaging and disengaging, engaging and disengaging really fast. Because it just doesn't have enough voltage in the battery to keep it engaged. So that's classic symptom number one. And let me go back here to the battery and show you something. Now you'll notice my battery is in the little storage compartment here. Years ago when we bought the RV, the way it was laid out, from the factory we had one 12 volt for the engine, two 12 volt deep cycles for the house batteries. And then as things evolved, I wanted to put in 6 volts. So I put in 4 6 volts deep cycle batteries, moved the engine starting battery to here. And then that went for 5 years till those batteries wore out. Then I went to 3 100 amp hour battle-born batteries. I got those stuck right there, and I just left the engine starting battery there, and I just use that for extra storage. So that's why I changed it up a little bit. But I just wanted to mention to you, get a hold of these cables and make sure they are tight. If they move at all, so that one's got a little bit of wiggle to it, just a little bit. And you see I keep a little 5/16 ratchet wrench handy in case I need to unhook or disconnect something quick. Alright, but I've snugged that one up. Make sure other cable's really good. But they're usually the problem spot to look for is wherever this ground cable goes. It will go up under the frame somewhere, and there's usually a lot of rust and corrosion there. So investigate that cable. Make sure it's really good and clean. So once you do that, let's go back to the dash again. Okay, now that everything is tight, you should crank this way. You see how it cranked and these lights stayed on? Because now I got a good amount of a good connection there at the battery at this point. Okay, when I was talking about those ground cables under the RV, I was just giving an example. We've crawled under ours here. So this is a Winnebago 38J, and you see up here, see this? They got like an angle iron welded in here with a bunch of different holes. So this is a major junction area for all your grounds. So that's something to be aware of. So from time to time you got to come in here, take everything loose, shine everything up, sand it good, put it back on there. So find your location on all your grounds and keep an eye on them. So, because that could be a weak link, cause problems. Okay, so there's another scenario too I want to bring to your attention of a no crank situation. So say for instance you turn the key on. Well, it beeps a lot, doesn't it? Good gravy. Okay, you get all these beeps, but then you get this no J1850 activity. So let me go out front and show you what you need to look for. And you notice, you turn the key, nothing happens. Got no start, no nothing. Let me show you what to look for. So if you happen to see that error, come out here and pull this fuse, the 10 amp fuse. You see here, it is called the PCM TCM fuse. Pull it, and if it's blown, get another 10 amp fuse, Put it in there. If it blows instantly, then you most likely got a bad TCM. That's the transmission control module. Transmission, which one is that? I gotta remember if it's the top or the bottom. Yeah, I believe your transmission computer is on the top, where the engine control computer is on the bottom. So you'd have to take that out. I believe Brazils, I got a little piece of paper here too, tells you what to do. They have a service where they can repair those, but they mention, and I'll put a link to this below this video, but I think if you pop the top off of it and it smells all burnt electrical smell, then it may not be repairable. But if there's no burnt smell inside of it, there is a repair procedure they can do to fix that. Maybe some kind of exchange policy, something they can do, get you another computer, a TCM back to you quick, get you back on the road. But if you've repeatedly blown this fuse, I know it's a bad day. That can happen sometimes. Of course, I wanted to mention the way I forced that air on our RV, I just pulled this fuse because I wanted you to know what the air looked like. So I'm going to put the fuse back in and we'll go on to some more testing procedures. All right, let me show you another scenario, and this is the more likely scenario. All your lights are on, you go to start, and nothing happens. No cranking, but all your lights stay on. Now, a very good possibility right here could be the starter relay, starter solenoid, the starter itself. And a lot of times if it's down to the starter aspect of it, it's usually just in the brushes. So there's something we can do to hopefully get you one or two more starts out of it before you need to buy a new starter. But first of all, before you crawl underneath the RV, let's check the relay. So this would be one of the more common failures because you see, in order to create the same scenario, I pulled the relay, but this is our start relay right here. But we have 3 relays and they're all the same part number. So this is the auxiliary fans in front of the radiator that kick on. That's the start relay here, and that's your air conditioning relay. And you see I keep a diagram printed out nice and big. So that in that situation, just swap one. Just take one out here and swap it in this hole, and then it should start for you if it was a bad relay. I get it lined up here. All right, pop it in there, and now we'll see if it'll start. So if you tried that and then it starts for you, then you know you just had a bad relay. Pick your one up at O'Reilly's or somewhere. They're fairly common. Or actually, I recommend carrying one of those as a spare because it handles 3 different things. It's always good to have a spare. Well, let me point this out. This is pretty handy too. I've got a video talking about, I call it the Workhorse magic switch. They're like a little relay toggle. It's a way you can quickly test for a bad relay. And if you go to my YouTube channel there and just search magic or switch, it'll pop up. But just to give you an illustration of how cool it is, so if you wanted to test to make sure if it was relay was bad, you could just toggle the switch and you hear the starter will engage. So that way you know what the problem is. Handy little tool to have, and I just keep it tucked up here in the fuse box. Handy. All right, let's talk about another rare scenario. This could happen also. So you turn your key, nothing happens. It could be the switch on your transmission. This is called the NSBU switch, neutral, safety, backup switch. I think the acronym stands for something like that. But anyway, that's what it looks like on your 5-speed Allison transmissions, mounted on the side of the transmission, and your shifter linkage goes through that hole when it tells the transmission when you're in park, neutral. And of course, there's safety switches in there that keeps you from starting it, like if it's in drive or reverse or something like that. So that's a rare scenario, but that's something else to think about. But if this was at fault, we can still get you started by just using that switch I was showing you, because that switch will kind of bypass everything, or we actually can work it from underneath the RV. I've done that too. So our next step, we'll do that. We'll call under the RV and I'll show you how you could force a start if all else fails. Alright, so our next scenario I'm going to show you, say for instance you got a bad relay and what you don't have a spare or whatever, even though you got two more. Or maybe the safety switch back there on the transmission is preventing the signal from ever making it to the starter itself. So I'm going to show you how we can actually make it start. I'm going to leave this unplugged, but I can still make the engine start. Let me show you how to do that. All right, something I want to add there's a fuse also that protects this relay. That fuse is your little 5-amp fuse right here. So also check it. If it happens to be blown, then you got to ask yourself, okay, why did it blow? If I got a short somewhere. So if you put another 5-amp fuse in it and it blows again, then you're going to have to probably do what I'm about to show you. Remember, it's kind of sketchy because you're going to be under the RV. If you hopefully you have someone with you, have your wife or whatever, make sure that the parking brake's on or foot's on the brake, that the gear shift lever is in park, so the RV's not going anywhere, because you can force a start from under the RV. I'm about to show you that. One more thing I want to point out is about the transmission fuse blowing. Another way to confirm that is if you unplug the connector on I think there's two connectors on the back of this transmission computer. If you unplug those and then the engine starts and runs and it doesn't blow the fuse, then you know for certain that computer is your problem, that you have to get it sent off, either repaired or replaced. Hopefully that's not your scenario. But all right, back to the show. So before I crawl under the RV, ignition key is on, lights are ready to roll. So I'm going to crawl under there and see if we can't start it up just by myself with no one else in the RV. All right, this gets kind of tricky. So, because you got to be careful, because you're underneath the engine, the fan blades and crazy stuff is spinning. So, but this is doable if you have to. So you can see there's a main battery cable right here. It's going to this main lug. Now our goal is, say for instance, bad relay, bad safety switch on the transmission or something other, we can't get the signal to the solenoid. Our goal is to get 12 volts to that small wire, that small terminal. We're right there. See my screwdriver's touching the small terminal. So if we just cross the small terminal to the large terminal, that will engage the starter and it should start. So let's try that. Now I have to be careful here, where I'll make sure your hands are out of the way of everything. So let's see if we can't start this engine this way. If I get positioned right where you can see it and I can see it both. All right, here we go for a crank. Now it's running. So see there in the pinch, you can make it run. I got a check engine light though. Why'd I do that? Let's see what that's all about. Do a scan. Loss of communication with throttle actuator and control module. What else I got? Okay, that's only one. See if anything's pending. That's why you want to scan gauge 3. These things are great for that stuff. Okay. All right, clear. It probably got that because I had the computer unplugged earlier. Kind of had everything freaked out. But anyway, that's the way you can start it. Now we wanted to see about, we're going to troubleshoot, try to determine if the starter is truly bad, what we can do if it is, to try to get 1 or 2 more starts out of it. Okay, back on the RV. So what we just did a second ago, we jumped from the large post to the small wire and forced it to crank. But what if you do that and you don't hear any sound? You could possibly have a bad solenoid. So an easy way to check that is, let's just make contact. So let's think about what the solenoid does, or how the whole system works. You've got several things happening at the same time. The moment you turn the start key, you got to energize that little relay. The relay sends a 12-volt source to this small wire. This small wire energizes this magnetic switch. It's like a little cylinder. It slides up. When it slides up, there is a round copper disc. That round copper disc will make contact with these 2 large studs, this large stud here and the one back here, and that will make the starter spin. But another thing is happening at the same time. When the solenoid's job, besides making the starter spin, it's also its job is to kick out the Bendix. So I'll give you an example. I can make the starter work without engaging the solenoid, and all will happen is the starter will spin, but the engine will not crank. I'll show you here what we're going to do. So if you can do that, okay, you know your brushes and you know your starter is good. It's just the problem, for whatever reason, either the solenoid is bad or you're not getting a good 12-volt source to the solenoid. Like we showed you before, just go here and then it'll crank. Well, if I get to the right spot, let me find a shiny. There you go. Because I got the ignition key off now, it crank, and it will start. But that'll give you an idea of something you can test. One more thing you can do, because most likely you'll have your spouse up in the seat. So say, for instance, you get under here and you cross, you do this trick, you cross this and you're not getting nothing. You know you got a 12-volt source here most likely. If you didn't, you'd have a bad battery or something going on. But have the wife go up there, work the ignition switch, at the same time, tap the back of the starter. Don't have to do a whole lot because your brushes are right here in the rear. Just give that a tap as the wife is working the ignition switch. And if your brushes are wore down, you can usually get them to engage and get one or two more starts out of it before the brushes completely lose contact. That'll get you out of a jam and get you to the campground, get you somewhere so you can get the starter removed and replaced. In fact, that's what I'm going to do right now. You'll see here I got a note on there, O'Reilly's lifetime warranty. So many miles back, I would get occasionally, I'd have an intermittent no start. My relay was good, so I tracked it down. It was a bad solenoid, and I made a video on it a long time ago. But it wasn't really thorough about tearing the starter all apart and everything. It was kind of a quick and dirty video. But I put that solenoid on there, and remember, this is a 20-year-old starter and 20-year-old brushes, and I'm pushing 80,000 miles. And I've talked to a lot of people, lately, where the starters are failing. They're going out, and they're going out here and buying these cheap starters, and they last about a year, and then they crap out. So I encourage everybody, if you still got your OEM starter, and if you've made it to 75 or 80,000 miles, go ahead and drop it. Maybe get it rebuilt at a local rebuilder, get new brushes put in it. You just can be very careful about these aftermarket starters. Now, you can still get the OEM starters. I'm sure Brazel still stocks the OEM factory starters, and that might be a better option for you if you don't have a local rebuilder. I know that's getting rarer and rarer all the time. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to show you how to remove the starter safely, and we'll take it to the bench and tear it all down. Okay, I know I just got done saying I'm going to show you how to remove the starter, but actually I'm going to put that in part 2. So below this video you just watched, there's going to be a link to part 2, and with it I'm going to go in great detail removing the starter, how to put it back on, and more importantly how to take it all apart and go through it yourself. So I'm assuming at the end of this video you've already figured out if you need a new starter or not, or maybe just a solenoid, something you can fix yourself. But regardless, if you're on the road and you need a new starter, go ahead and pick one up, something quick and dirty, get yourself back on the road. But do not let your original starter get away from you for a core. Keep it, take it home with you. Maybe rebuild it yourself. You can follow part 2. You can do it yourself quite easily, or take it to a local rebuilder. Let them check it out. Most of the time, it's just a solenoid. It's rare that you need brushes, it turns out, in these types of starters. Oh, something else I want to point out is about how cheap starters are these days. Like, for instance, you can buy a starter here on Amazon. Well, first of all, look at the reviews here. Starter failed after 4 months. Trash, junk. What else? Poor product quality. Test before installing. You get what you pay for. But of course, you can see why. Because the thing's only, where's it at? $54. So how in the world can you build a quality starter for $54? Well, just a good solenoid alone will cost you $39, $45 just for a solenoid. So beware on these cheap starters. You've got a motorhome. Your goal is to get to point A to point B and not have a breakdown. So don't take a risk on this cheap stuff. Because your original starter probably lasts you 20 years, And if you get it rebuilt properly with good components, hopefully we get another 20 years out of it. Anyway, if you want to learn more, just click on part 2.